Hello and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by CIPS in partnership with Hays. This is the final part in our four-part webinar series following on from the launch of our 2022 CIPS Salary Guide at the start of last year. In the second part, we looked at how to maximise your career and your earning potential. And in the third part, towards the end of 2022, we delved into skills and how they're driving the value of procurement. I'm Sharon Morris. I'm the General Manager at CIPS Australia and New Zealand. And I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi and Wurrung and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. They are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm presenting from tonight, and I pay my respects to any Maori, Pacifica, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who may be present. But I'd also like to extend this respect to all our traditional custodians of all the lands that we're gathered on today. And I'm joined by a fantastic procurement profession experts to talk about how to make inclusion strategies stick to unlocking high-performing teams. This is going to be a great one. I'm really excited about this. So first up, and everybody will introduce themselves as I mention their name. First up, we have Rebecca Coffell. She is Chief Procurement Officer at Queensland Corrective Services. Rebecca, I'd love to hear a little bit about you. Could you please briefly introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yes, I am a neurodivergent procurement professional. I've been in procurement for in excess of 15 years. And I have ADHD and I'm very open about my divergence, and I advocate for our fellow cohort. I'm passionate about creating high-performing teams. I'm passionate about ensuring that we provide the right supports and adjustments to leverage off and benefit from those intentional design.
Terrific. Thanks, Rebecca. Great to have you on the panel. We also have Julian John. He's CEO at Delusion, and I'd love to hear a little bit about yourself too, Julian. Go for it.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Delcian, we're a people and development consultancy, and what we do is we focus on creating diverse, inclusive and equitable workplaces. With regards to a little bit about my background, it's been within human resources at a senior level for a number of years, and in 2005 I suffered from a brain injury, and that left me housebound for 3 years, 5 years into stand, walk and talk again, and as a result of that I was unemployed for a long period of time and also homeless. And I think it was all those experiences of exclusion and understanding what other people face as well that led me to do what I do now. And that means we're very fortunate to work with some fantastic organisations, but we're also very fortunate to be here today. So I'm looking forward to the session.
We're very fortunate. Thanks, Julian. And last but not least, we have Fatima Belfouki. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Thank you very much, Sharon. First of all, I thank CIPS and for including me with such esteemed speakers today. I'm very privileged to share this time with all of you. My name is Fatima Belfouki. I am the Managing Director of RKAH Legal Consultancy. I am by profession a procurement professional that have morphed into the legal world. I advocate very much for inclusive workplaces, especially in a very male-dominant industries such as procurement and law. So yeah, I know how to pick my careers sometimes, I think. I'm very happy to be here today and to share the experiences.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Fatima. Now, all of our panellists will be taking your questions on the topics at the end. So if you've got any questions, then please submit them into the comments section below the video, and we'll keep that to the end of the session. And if you want to direct any of your questions to a particular speaker, then make sure you put their name in the comment and I'll make sure that they answer your question. And just a reminder that this webinar will be recorded today and it's going to be made available to watch on demand very soon after the recording. So let's get started, making inclusion strategies stick to unlocking high-performing teams. Now, according to the CIPS Procurement Salary Guide 2022, the one sponsored by Hays, 91% globally believe a diverse and inclusive workplace culture ensures a more attractive place to work. So I'd like to ask our panellists to first share with us their different perspectives in what do you think a diverse and inclusive workplace culture creates? Does it create a better place to work? Rebecca, we might start with you.
Thank you, Sharon. From my perspective, a neurodivergent perspective, I like to, and I don't know if this is a coined approach, use the NDXI, the Neurodiversity Experience Insights approach, where we're actually looking at designing teams and the diversity within the teams from a different NDs, whether you have ADHD or you're autistic or other divergence, and neurotypical, and allocating the appropriate roles and designing your teams around your strengths. And just that, to me, and my experience to date, has ensured that we are mitigating staff turnover, we're reducing increasing retention and reducing staff turnover, and ensuring that we're high-performing teams and that culture is increased. Please excuse me, I'm losing my words. And that's an ADHD moment for me. So for me, I find that engagement and that increase in culture actually comes from allocating the appropriate roles, the appropriate design to the relevant people. I myself, being ADHD, I think slightly differently. I think in a more strategic, I think in a more 3D creative and innovative way, versus my other colleagues that may be neurotypical don't think in that respect. So I like to create my teams around our strengths.
Great, thanks very much. Julian, I'm interested in your perspective from the disability perspective.
Well, if we start thinking in regards to the wider impact that it have on, as I said, on a culture and a better place to work, then I think it impacts on such a wide area, and I generally mean it, and certainly from a disability point of view. So if we take a moment to think about what it means, we're talking about creating or evolving a workplace that is so rich with diverse knowledge, experiences, and different perspectives that may have been overlooked, where we've got an abundance of skills such as problem solving, resilience, empathy, creativity, and that list can go on and on. But when a workplace where people can be their real, authentic selves and have that opportunity to maximize their potential. And from a disability perspective, if we start looking at the numbers that sit behind this, we're talking about 1 in 5, 20% of the workplace. So we need to take that place where we imagine a workplace where there are no barriers because of limited flexibility or lack of accessibility. And from a people and culture perspective, I suppose it's interesting because if you started a business, a company, an organization, or an industry with a blank piece of paper, that's what you'd actually dream of, be able to have that workplace in the first place. And one day, because this is always a case of when this is going to happen rather than if it's going to happen, there's great strides being taken. One day we'll look back at this and think, well, why on earth did it take so long? Why on earth did it take so long to understand the real impact, certainly around disability, to make workplaces that inclusive and that accessible for everyone?
Yeah, terrific. Thank you. And what are you seeing, Fatima, in terms of a better workplace, in terms of diversity and inclusion around the workplace culture?
So being here in the UAE, I have the advantage of us being truly a melting pot of different cultures. I think there's more than 180 nationalities that choose to work here in the UAE. And each one of them brings their own unique way of doing and conducting work, of thinking, of communicating. And I think the trap that most of the time we fall into, especially when we get into a corporate culture, people start emulating behavior of what they think is culturally appropriate to behave inside an organization, missing out on crucial factors and crucial benefits of bringing that different way of working and integrating it into the diverse ecosystem of every organization. The more, and we're going to speak about all the benefits and the strategies across today. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but as Julian have said, when we're looking back from today, we see how far we come, but I think there is a lot yet to be done in terms of integration, culture-wise, disabilities-wise, whether it is seen or unseen disability, because unseen disabilities sometimes are dismissed. And also gender-wise, of course, it's a very important topic. Yeah, these are my views on this matter.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad you mentioned benefits, because we will get stuck into the benefits, because, more diverse teams perform better. So, making inclusion strategy sticks isn't just really a nice thing to do. It's actually, there's benefits to the business. So let's get into those business benefits. What are the benefits of having an effective and authentic inclusion strategy? And can you share some of those tangible benefits, both your own organisation, but also to the team's experience? And Julian, we might start with you.
I think from our own experiences and with the businesses that we work with, every organisation sees a tangible benefit. I think we're moving from the position around equality, diversity and inclusion, where it was seen to be a growing trend of something that an organisation should be doing. So there's very much this focus on what's the return on investment on it. And there's widespread benefits that sit around it. I think the interesting piece that sits for me is that every organisation we work with, we wait for that time when they come back to us and say, we wouldn't have been able to do something, whether it had been a project, whether it had been something around recruitment, if we weren't working towards being as inclusive as we can. So recently we've worked with an organisation that's been just recognised as one of the best places to work. And we've taken a look at all their KPIs. We can really draw a direct line across the impact that effective inclusion has on the business. But the good thing is, that the more things that happen around this agenda, the more measurement that takes place. So Deloitte did a fantastic piece of work called Insights, where it looked at the leading effectively inclusive organisation, and the findings were that they were twice as likely to meet or exceed the financial targets, 3 times as likely to be regarded as high performing, 6 times more likely to be more innovative and agile. And that's a real key with some like IT organizations. 8 times more likely to achieve better outcomes. There was another piece of work that was done in the new year which said that companies high in racial and ethnic diversity are 35% more likely to have financial returns above industry norms. Companies high in gender diversity are 25% more likely to have above average profitability. And Accenture did some research that companies on hiring disabled people outperformed where profit margins were roughly 30% higher, net income was 200% higher, revenues were 28% higher, and shareholder returns were 4 times higher. So the measurements sit there. The business case is absolutely there. The position is to get those tangible benefits in the organization where they're recognized with regard to them being as part of an effective inclusion strategy and making that workplace as inclusive it is and as diverse it is for the benefits of everyone.
And Fatima, what about from your perspective?
So as Julian have rightfully said, the business case have already been proven, not only laid down, it have been proven time and time again. And I think organizations and SMEs and everybody who is in the position of employing or giving opportunities of employment should look at a more authentic strategy on how to include those minorities or diverse groups within the society, whatever it is from country to country. I think, I cannot add on the statistics that have been laid down by Julian. They're all, I concur, and I've seen the same statistics. So yeah, it makes, even if we speak in the terms of purely financial impact and return on investment, it makes absolute sense for organizations to put achievable, realistic methods of measuring how are they going to include more diverse staff organization.
Absolutely. And those statistics certainly are impressive and kind of a no-brainer. Rebecca, I'm wondering if you've got some more personal experience in terms of the business benefits of an inclusion strategy.
Yeah, from my perspective, I've found that just putting that neurodiverse inclusion lens over it and developing the teams, we're creating that, and I've seen it and worked within the teams within science and engineering, and also within the human services sector as well, that we're creating passionate teams that align with organisational purpose, organisational objectives, and what organisations want to achieve. Where I currently am at Queensland Corrective Services, we have such a diverse range of what we call officers and employees. We have allied health professionals. They're all aligned to the one passion and the one response. It's reducing recidivism through a trauma-informed approach. So we're all looking at it from the same lens. We all want the same thing, same outcomes, but we have all a slightly different way of delivering it and creating a similar sort of benefit. From my perspective, I'm putting that ND lens over how I can accelerate our team and create a more cohesive team and deliver social benefits and social outcomes through undertaking procurement.
And that's I'm sure that's very satisfying. Keep going.
It is extremely satisfying. There's some absolutely amazing things that we are doing. And because we have such engaging people within QCS that are wanting to make a difference, we are looking at things in a really different way, and we are delivering some amazing outcomes that are providing throughput from the offender management, trauma-informed approach, when we are providing the services within the prisons, through the offender, through providing gainful employment. And a lot of the people that we, well, I should say offenders that we are helping within the system and out of the system are neurodivergent, whether they are or aren't diagnosed. Some are and some aren't on NDIS applicants as well. So there's a lot of different avenues and a lot of different diversity within our cohort.
I love the fact that you brought in purpose, and that one focus that everybody's got on, and they're all coming at from different perspectives with different lenses. Thank you. We're starting to get some questions coming up, so get your questions going. We're going to have plenty of time to ask questions of this fantastic panelist. So you do start putting them in the comment section there. Look, when I think about some of the key skills of our procurement professionals today, those skills that were highlighted in the CIPS Hayes survey, the leadership skills, the influencing skills, communication, supplier relationship management, negotiation, I think the procurement profession is really well placed to lead on in diverse and inclusive workplaces. Wouldn't that be amazing if our profession was the one to kind of benchmark with regards to inclusion? So the next question I'm curious to know from the panel is, why should procurement professionals in particular engage in diverse and inclusive hiring practice? And really, why does it matter to our profession? And Rebecca, I'm going to start back with you.
For me, I find that we can make a difference. If we are engaging, if we are changing our hiring practices and making those adjustments and accommodations to retain and onboard neurodivergent personnel, we can deliver some positive outcomes. For me, it matters in what we deliver. It matters in how we actually approach and how we can engage with our community. There's so many positive benefits to creating diverse teams.
Absolutely. And what about from your perspective, Fatima? What are you seeing out there in your workplace?
Again, more and more we see, especially in the procurement field, it is acknowledged now that there is a lot of room to include more people, because the profession lends itself to allow that inclusion. Here in the UAE, a few years ago, the disabled community have been renamed by the government of the UAE into people of determination. We are no longer using the term of disability or a disabled person. We're calling them people of determination, because truly that is who they are, no matter what is their disability is. they're persevering on a daily basis in order to be able to find opportunities and jobs and proving themselves. So definitely the profession helps. There is an absolute support and push from the government and the legislator to provide that opportunity, because sometimes you need that, legal enforcement or kind of nudge towards the right direction. And then when people start seeing the true benefit, then it will slowly become a more organic and natural effort. And lastly, I would say that I've seen even a difference in the way that schools and universities are dealing with people, especially with either a physical disability or neurological disability. My son is actually diagnosed with ADHD, in addition to a few other learning difficulties. And his school has a whole program on how to support him in his unique way of learning. And I think if we stay in that trajectory of accommodating those special needs as the new generation are going, definitely by, I think, and there's a statistic saying that by 2044, all the minority groups will somehow be a majority. It will no longer be a minority because they will be so integrated within the society, whether it's a racial minority or a disability minority. So I think we should definitely, yes, focus on inclusion in the profession at our level, and that the foot should not be lifted out of the pedal, but there's a lot to be done in the early stages of adopting, helping, integrating the kids into the society in a more organic manner, where it does not become an issue. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent a little bit, but it does not become an issue or something that we need a special strategy. It's just a normal person who works slightly differently, who are fully integrated within the workplace, whether it's in procurement or in any other profession. I'll end it here.
So if we start them off when they're children, it's just a normal. Inclusion is just the normal thing to do. I love that. Thank you, Gillian. Our profession is just screaming out for talent. Absolutely screaming out for talent. So what can you say to our procurement professionals as to why they should be hiring diverse and inclusive people?
Oh, first, I just want to agree with everything that Fatima said with regards to we need to get to the stage where this just becomes part of every single day activity that involved, and it sits a lot wider than outside the organisations. Certainly, it's a really interesting time around procurement at the moment. There's some fantastic opportunities, and it's really interesting for me because we recently became the first accredited disability-owned business enterprise outside of the US. And we did that because there's a large focus in procurement around engaging with diverse-owned businesses. And we think within UK and US businesses alone, spend's going to double over the next 2 years. So what's the link within that? Well, I can guarantee that the most successful organizations around diverse procurement will be the ones that have the most inclusive culture, be the most diverse teams and most effective teams, because they have more knowledge, more empathy and engagement that sits around there. And when we look at inclusive hiring, that means about, as you said, getting potential and talent into the business. But also what it'll mean is you'll start recognizing and understanding some of the barriers that will sit in an organization to allow that talent through the doors. And you'll be really surprised that there's some of the barriers that you won't be aware of. And from a disability perspective, that's absolutely huge. And I think finally, my last reason is really, really simple around inclusive hiring and being able to get that talent and that potential, be that inclusive organization that you're seeking, is that if you're not doing it, I'll guarantee your competitor is. And I'll guarantee that you as a business, you'll start moving backwards because you know where all the talent's going to be going, where all the potential is. So some real key things around there, but there has to be this link around all the activities sit within procurement. And I think you're right, Sharon Garza, there's some huge opportunities within this area to really excel. So some exciting times.
Absolutely. Some great comments here. I like what Fatima said. Indeed, there are some other unseen disabilities which are excluded and are supposed to be taken into account because these things that affect the organisation indirectly. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you. I'll read some of those questions out. Keep them coming. The salary guide revealed that 52% of businesses use unbiased language to describe vacancies, organisations and culture across all sectors. But that means that 48% do not. So it's one thing to have an inclusion strategy, but businesses really need to walk the talk, and there's an increasing emphasis on being able to measure success. And we've already spoken quite a bit about measuring success, but that can be a challenge. I'm just wondering if you can share some best practice examples of demonstrating authentic inclusion strategy and how that success was measured. Julian, perhaps we'll go back to you.
We've been working with a large organisation for the last 2 years, and it was very much the opportunity to start at the very beginning because it was a new organisation. And it's about setting a strategy which you know is going to have an impact and know it's going to be meaningful, and that the actions that are coming out of it are meaningful. You start with a senior leadership team and you work your way down through there, but everyone should have a voice within the organisation. There should be key points of measurement. There should also be key points of review. But the really interesting thing that I found from doing our work over the last 8 years or so, that it has to be authentic. We used authentic a number of times during our discussions today, because I've never seen anything so transparent in my business career. If what you're doing isn't authentic, it can be seen from a million miles away. So it really does have to have that impact. Interestingly, Google spent around about $256 million over a 3-year period around inclusion, and recognized that they didn't get it right because they didn't engage the right people. They didn't engage everyone. They didn't make the meaningful change they needed to. So we use a piece of work called Seren. Seren is Welsh for star. So think a bit of shining as brightly as you can. And it says with regards to around the strategy, you need to have that really key strategy that impacts everything. You have to engage everyone around it. That's internal stakeholders and external. But the key part of it is you're going to have to reimagine some things. You're going to have to go back and look at some of the things that you're doing and say, right, does that fit? Knowledge is key. So you educate to empower. And the most effective inclusion is when, as Fatima said, it becomes part and parcel of everything. So you nurture a network that sits around there. And with regards to measurement, set a baseline before you start doing some of these ED&I activities. You can see where you've moved from. Link it to as many KPIs as you can, and you'll be really surprised how many KPIs will have an impact on it. So labour turnover, engagement, the amount of people that you develop and promote through the business. But the other thing as well, it is an ongoing piece. It's not a piece where you can do for a month, move on to another bit. It has to be an ongoing piece of work with this continuous measurement, this continuous review, and always keep improving on. So those are the tips that we share from what we do.
Thank you. And Rebecca, what about from your perspective, how are you measuring your success in this space?
Thank you. I do want to call out that engaging the right people, that I find is probably the most effective and the best approach, actually engaging as many as you can. And as one of the comments were that there are many disabilities, diversity is huge. It covers a lot. So if we're engaging those that we think or those that we may know do or don't have a disability, whether that's neurodivergence or a physical unseen disability, or the so-called minorities. We need to ensure that, yes, we are engaging, yes, we are inclusive, yes, we are doing that. But from my perspective, I like to actually just talk to my teams, discuss with my teams, discuss with my people, and develop strategies based on what they know works, what they think. Everyone is different. What I think works might work for a small percentage of the neurodivergent community that have ADHD. What some of my team members will work for them that are autistic or neurotypical would be and is completely different. The other element of ensuring that inclusion strategy sticks and the success of that for me and how I'm ensuring that I'm achieving that is looking at how my team's structured, looking at how we are actually delivering and what we're delivering, allocating the tasks, the duties, those fun, exciting, risky sort of high profile projects to the people within the team that like them. Those other very transactional sort of reoccurring tasks and duties. We have a lot of neurotypical people that enjoy routine. They enjoy routine. We have a lot of other neurodivergent people that also enjoy developing framework, developing governance, not getting into the nitty-gritty transactional or the high risk and complex activities. I'm finding that pairing the right person with the activity is getting a better result and keeping them excited and willing to take on more and excel and learn and grow. That's how I'm finding it. I guess, success at the moment. There's many other things that we are trying to do, including looking at how we're structuring our meetings. We have a lot of meetings across the commands. There's a lot of training sessions. I actually attended a disability training session that was 3 hours long, that had no break in the middle. It was absolutely horrific. So we need to think differently about how we're structuring meetings, those horrid icebreakers, and the length. I hate icebreakers.
Great, some really great practical examples there too. Thanks, Rebecca. And Fatima, what's your perspective on some of these things that can be measured to measure success?
I would say definitely what cannot be measured or what is not measured cannot be improved upon. And I think, I would say it as it is here in the region, it's quite lacking the amount of statistics that we bring out. There's a lot of initiatives happening. There's a lot of efforts happening from social figures, from government, from everything. But it's so difficult to find up-to-date statistics about all of that. And if we don't have it in a very reliable manner, how can we expect any improvements, right? So the companies will go and do a one celebrating inclusion, celebrating diversity, celebrating women, celebrating people of determinations, and then what? What is coming out of it? What is resulting out of it? Those are questions that we need to be measuring every single month, every single week, every single day, whatever are the KPIs that are set out for each company. In addition, I would say, as Rebecca rightfully said, we need to think about realistic and practical inclusion. How is the accessibility? Logistically speaking, I'm not a disabled woman, I'm just a woman. And I have been faced so many times that I would hate to think about even that I go somewhere in a very male-dominant place and I don't even find a women's restroom, you know? And especially in sites or in like very in remote places, because my work would take me here or there. And I'm not asking for anything special, but even at that level, when you're not including the right people in the discussion, of course, you're not going to get the logistical support for all of that. So we absolutely need to include people of determination, women, different age groups, I would say, different cultural and religious backgrounds as well. And above all, we need to measure what is the efforts and how can we improve upon it year after year. The latest statistics, and I say that this was a very long-winded introduction to the fact that I was looking at statistics in the UAE, and the latest is like some unofficial statistics, 2022, 2020, but the latest official statistics was in 2018. And I might not be right, but that is what I found. Maybe it's there, but it was not accessible very easily for me when I was researching. So that in itself is an issue. And then when the statistics are measured, they usually measure how many women, how many nationalities, very briefly people of determination, but they don't go into details of neurodivergent disabilities and physical disabilities. And a part of it is also that we're still working on destigmatizing people of determination as a whole. We're relatively a young region, and there's still some social aspects that we need to work hard on. And again, this is where statistics and KPIs and on all of those efforts that will help us keep people accountable.
Absolutely. If it's measured, it can be managed. Thank you, Fatima. I'm just going to jump to some of the questions that are coming in from the audience, which is fantastic. To attract, Kate asked, to attract a diverse workforce, what would the one top action that each of the panelists would recommend? Gillian, I might jump to you. To attract a diverse workforce, what's one top action you'd take?
Look where you recruit from. Look where that talent pool is. If you're following the traditional methods of recruitment and you're advertising the same papers on the same websites, just widen your view of where you recruit from would be my one top tip around that.
Fantastic. Any additions to that, Rebecca or Fatima?
From my perspective, make adjustments. Make adjustments to how you're actually recruiting. Text can be in job adverts, can be very confusing and ambiguous to different people. Make an adjustment. If you're not attracting the right, adjust it.
Terrific.
I would say also, if I can add to that, just take the methodology of blind CVs to remove any unconscious biases that the recruiter might have. So I would say keep a blind CV, blind from name, gender, religion, and possible disabilities as well.
Thank you. Great question. Thank you. Keep them coming. Another question, which I might answer, is how is SIPS considering inclusion in design of training and professional CPD? I think SIPS is on a journey, and we know that it's a long journey, and we've got a lot to learn. We've made some great inroads recently by doing a global survey on what our members are, what their diversity is, and I think if it's measured, it can be managed. We'll have a better understanding of who our members are. And I also think we do a number of, since COVID, which is one of the positive things out of COVID, is we have gone on a global scale, gone from webinar practices and remote invigilation, where people can do examinations at home in the comfort of their own home and not have to go into other buildings and be accessible elsewhere. And the content and looking at our content is really the next step as to how our materials can be made accessible to everyone. But there are a lot of steps that SIPS is slowly taking, but it is a journey, and it will evolve. And these types of series are so important for us to be able to get out there and just discuss best practice for the profession, but also looking inwards for SIPS as well. Great question. Thank you. The next question is, what's the strategy around racial discrimination in the workplace? The strategy around racial discrimination in the workplaces. Would anyone like to tackle this one? Fatima, maybe?
Yeah, I will not claim that I'm an expert on racial discrimination, but I would say that I have a unique perspective where I work quite a bit with the international community, whether it's on the procurement level or it's on the international level. And I think it might be naive of all of us to say, there's no discrimination happening. Some of it is very unconscious, right? A lot of people, there is a lot of growth that have happened. There's a lot of advances that have happened, but I think we still need to educate. And I think Julian has said something in the lines of the importance of educating ourselves towards certain sensitivities, cultural, racial, religious, or whatever it is. People more often than not are willing to listen and are willing to discuss and are willing to learn. And we should not be scared to voice our discomfort in certain situations. You know, if a very uncomfortable racial situation comes up, we need to advocate for ourselves. And I know, like, I'm a lawyer by profession, so I'll always advocate for other people, but sometimes I do need to advocate for myself without it being a huge issue from the beginning, and make sure that we're putting our voices or points of view across. In addition, there comes the role of the organizations themselves. There needs to be a robust anti-discrimination processes in place. It has to be dealt in privacy, in a non-retaliatory method, and I think the topic of dealing with diversity and inclusion, whatever it is, especially with HR, we need to not dismiss the humanity of it all, right? We're at the end of the day dealing with something so personal and so humane, and a perspective that is unique to each person. So we need to deal with the situation with humanity and humility of organizations and HR, and not look at it only as a process. This is a process, this is how I'm gonna deal with the process. I think it's a delicate situation, and we need to be really considerate from all perspectives how we're gonna deal with it. But yeah, blatant discrimination definitely needs to be dealt with very decisively, I would say.
Thank you, and I love that perspective of dealing with humanity. That just about answers all questions, doesn't it? Thank you. Anyone want to add to that, or we jump into the next question?
I just think to add to Fatima, it's regards to the knowledge that sits within the organisation. It's the stance that an organisation takes, and very much anti-racist. I think what Black Lives Matters, certainly in America and the UK, showed us that it is now considered that organisations need to put forward an opinion on this, and there needs to be a clear understanding in organisations what privilege looks like within organisations, and understanding what the barriers are. And I think the organisation's responsibility is very much front and centre with all of this, as with all areas of inclusion.
Thank you. Nemo asks, how do you ensure ED&I adds value to the business bottom line? And this is a good question in terms of also from I'd add to that in terms of procurement functions. You know, how can they demonstrate that as well? So would someone like to tackle that? How do you ensure ED&I adds value to the business bottom line?
I'm happy to provide a response. Regarding the neurodivergent approach, we are able to think a slightly more creative, slightly more organically, and look at things in a more 3D perspective. So the way we can do things from a procurement perspective is deliver a different approach, not just deliver the same transactional activity. We can look at multiple ways of leveraging what is actually available within the market and how you actually want to deliver it. I guess it's not really taking that standard, we're going to deliver you cost savings, we're going to deliver you a different not really a different outcome, but a more innovative outcome, if that makes sense, that will provide you those better objectives. I'm getting my words completely tangled at the moment. Apologies. Would someone else like to take over? It's late at night here in Australia. Apologies.
It is indeed. Go, Julie.
I reeled out a load of stats earlier so that the business benefits are clear because we're starting to measure them. I think I'll go back to something else I mentioned, is that where we've got key performance indicators across the business, it's applying the inclusion lens to them. I mean, you only got to take recruitment for example as a real positive impact where inclusion can be measured time and time again with regards to candidate generation, the process, people staying within the business, people developed within the business. And again, we just need to have this wider lens on it. But I can put a flip chart up and I can write on it every single time of this is a business benefit, this is a business benefit. But what we need to do is take the time to say, right, we need to consider inclusion at the very start of some of these processes to understand what the benefits are, because they're huge. Generally, it's like lighting the blue touch paper on a firework with some of the impact of this stuff.
Yeah, great. And just while we've got you there, Julian, there's a question that's come in. Is there an inclusion policy that can help hiring managers be more conscious of inclusion in the workplace? And if so, if yes, how can this policy be enforced and strengthened? Are there any sort of resources that we can find and reach out to support our the audience here?
Yeah, there's loads of resources available. We, as I said, it's an area that we work on specifically around the policy. But a policy is two things. It's either words on a piece of paper which sit on a file somewhere on part of the website, or it's something which is taken and actioned. And obviously, the more it's actioned, the more impact it is going to have. And when it comes to hiring managers, what we need to do is instill the knowledge. We need to empower them, but they need to be a wider understanding of what the benefits are. I'll go a little bit off tangent. If we look at inclusion as being part of a leadership trait, which it absolutely is, the better managed in the organization see the value that sits behind it because they see what it adds to the team. So when managers get it, and understand it and can see the benefits that it adds to their teams and their organizations and the way they communicate, and they tap into that diverse knowledge, skills and experience, that's when it's at its most effective. But there's a lot of organizations where they'll accredit managers around inclusion before they can even start recruiting. But there needs to be consistency across the board as well within an organization, because that is a real pitfall. Where you put something in place in the policy and someone will adhere to it, somebody won't. You need to have that transparent, consistent, authentic process is the best that it works. But yeah, there's loads of examples of policies, and we can send a guide out or something that helps.
Terrific, thank you. Another question, how do you integrate diversity and inclusion within all the other aspects that need attention within procurement, such as sustainability, social return, price, quality, etc.? Does anyone want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I can take a go at that. I think it's the same state of mind, right? So if we're not looking at it as one issue that will have a one linear method of solution, will definitely fail. If we look at it as something that we integrate in our everyday efforts and everyday action, then that will yield into a more successful integration. Similarly to sustainability and environmental practices, it is not something that would say, I shall not print in the office, therefore I'm a green organization. It is something that you apply within your everyday practice within your organization. Not wasting resources, the ethos of reduce, reuse, and recycle is something that you practice on the daily. Similarly to diversity and inclusion, how accessible, and again, I think I've spoken a little bit more about realistic integration. Is there a slope for people who cannot walk and who are using wheelchair? Is there a line on the floor for people who are visually impaired? Do we have the infrastructure, the technology to support our visually impaired colleagues and their everyday work? Are they easily integratable within our everyday operations? I think one thing that we keep forgetting is, and that was very evident during COVID time, where everybody was working remotely and some people opted by choice or by force to work remotely, they started getting excluded from company functions. When somebody gets some donuts or sweets or breakfast to everyone in the team, they're excluded and they're not considered a part of the team because they're working remotely, right? Out of sight, out of mind kind of situation. So what do we do to bring them back, whether they're and this is only a small example and it's not really about disabled people and people of determination, but it's just simply somebody who is not partaking in the everyday of the organization. How are we structuring, as Rebecca said, the daily meetings? How are we scheduling team activities? So these things, daily things, we need to have somebody within the organization who a professional or somebody who is an expert in terms of diversity and inclusion, or somebody who is a person with some sort of a disability and kind of taking those feedback of how we can actively involve everyone realistically and authentically.
Thank you. Just got a few more quick questions before I go to you guys for your final words. But Hakim says that what about providing special quotas for inclusive hiring? Quotas is a really interesting one. There's certainly some evidence showing quotas for gender or diversity on boards. Back in my country, there's definitely a percentage of government spend on Indigenous procurement and the like. So actually putting quotas on people, I think, is a really interesting concept. Thank you. Ryan has said, hello, panel. How do businesses change their mindset in terms of unconscious bias? For example, I'm 40 years old, and no, it's not that old, but I have worked with skilled procurement professionals previously in their 50s who have been stuck in a job where the skills and knowledge has been overlooked, and when they apply for other jobs, they can send out many CVs without a reply. Is it inbuilt in humans to favour younger workers as they are less likely to be off work from illness? Interesting. Thank you, Ryan. Any comments from our panel?
I do find there is that unconscious bias, and I have come across it. I'd like to think there's not, and I'd like to say that I've never seen it before, but unfortunately there is that unconscious bias. I favour people. I favour people that want to work. I favour people that want to deliver outcomes, want to be collaborative and part of a team. I'm one of the people that I'm also stuck on the other end because I look ridiculously young and I'm not. So there is that other bias as well. Whereas I'm performing within my role, am I too young to do my role? Well, no. Unfortunately, we do have unconscious biases. It comes in every way, which way, shape and form. It's age, it's the invisible disability. I don't know how we can tackle it apart from calling it out, advocating for it, advocating for the people, the colleagues that you work for, advocating for your hiring manager, ensuring that we are calling out those unconscious biases as you see them.
And it really applies to everything else we've talked about in terms of inclusion, doesn't it? You know, we're cutting off our nose to spite our face if we don't involve everybody and include everybody in their perspectives. So regardless of the age, everybody needs to be included. And particularly if there's a war on talent, you know, you've got to use everyone that's available, especially those with more experience. So good question. I'm going to ask the panel, I'd love you to share your top tips from this session on how to get started with building an authentic inclusion strategy and what delivers business values. Just in closing, your thoughts. Fatima, you might like to start.
So again, it will go to a point that I've raised before. Humanize managing your employees, humanize managing, humanize hiring, the hiring process. It can, I've seen people going through it. It's just even the simplest anxiety that is given by somebody who's just waiting for a response, especially if that they're being turned down so many times because of discrimination, because of their disability, whatever it is. So I think just having that extra human touch when we're dealing with this whole manner, in addition to the importance of including different voices within the decision-making team. There is a lot of eagerness to hire inclusive workforce at the offset, at the beginning, at the entry point of all organizations, but we need to ask how many of them are on the management level, how many of them are retained until they are in the executive floor or executive corridor, whatever it is that your company has. And I think those are key points that you need to look into.
Thank you. Thank you for your insights, Fatima. Julian, your perspective and final comments.
I mean, it's been an absolutely fantastic session. So there's been a huge amount of knowledge in there. I think for me, it's taking the time to get the strategy right with some clear measurements in place and pick up on what Fatima mentioned about that. If you are holding events, if you are doing things, it has to link to a wider piece. Involve people, again, to pick up on what Rebecca said. But interestingly, it's such a changing and fast moving area that don't be afraid to ask. There's a huge amount of knowledge that sits out there. Also, understand how much knowledge you'll have in your organization and tap into that and allow that knowledge to come forward. Don't just follow trends that are going on. Understand what's best for your organization. But above all and above everything, apart from everything that I've certainly said, this is ultimately about people. And always remember that. And if if anything you're doing doesn't have an impact on an individual or a group, you've really got to question why you're doing it. Because I said, it's all about people and it's all about inclusion.
Perfectly said. Thank you. And Rebecca.
My biggest tip here today is, apart from the advocating for people, advocating for diversity, being authentic and calling out what is unconscious bias, taking that person-centered approach and making the relevant adjustments. If someone is calling out and needing some assistance, or you are seeing there is intentional exclusion and they aren't walking the walk, make the adjustments, call it out.
Thank you. Great, great insights. Thank you so much to the panel. And look, over the last few years, as I've said previous during this session, procurement leaders are really crying out for talent. So we have to throw away the rinse and repeat with regards to hiring candidates. Don't go for what you've always done, widen the scope and really look at your workplace, how much of you have diversity of race and ethnicity or gender or age or physical ability or sexual orientation. Look at your workplace, and if you haven't got that diversity, think about how you can get it in, because not only, as our panellists have beautifully said today, not only is diversity crucial for creativity, but for perspective, for experience and knowledge. And research shows that a diverse workplace is also good for that bottom line. So I'm afraid that is all we have time for today, and this is the final part of our series of webinars, and a recording will be made available again to watch on demand on our YouTube channel, so check that out. And I'd like to say a huge thanks to our panellists today, Rebecca, Julian and Fatima, your time, and just your generosity in terms of sharing your insights and experience has been so valuable for the audience. And to the audience, thanks for your participation in getting in there and asking questions and making comments. It was great to have you all on board. So thanks again to Hays for partnering with us on this webinar series. And please don't forget to go download the CIPS Salary Guide if you haven't already. So take care, and until next time, thanks for joining us.